when Dr. Nagler is not wrestling with matters related to quantum physics, he collects maps of Canada, Denmark, and the Holy Land. Having 3 collecting threads of my own, I'm deeply sympathetic to the condition. Anyway, over now to Stephen Nagler.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me because I just got a warning that my internet is unstable.
So did I, but you sound absolutely fine.
Okay, great. And I'd like to thank the organizers for putting this together. I think I've been a member of IMCoS for about 20 years. This is the first time I've been able to actively participate in a function. So, if we can go to the first slide. This is the title page for what is known as the Jabotinsky Atlas. This was the first atlas printed in Hebrew. And Zev Jabotinsky is known primarily for his politics, which I won't discuss, but in fact, he was by profession a writer. He was very interested in developing modern Hebrew as a language. He famously translated many literary works into Hebrew, including Edgar Allan Poe and Dante's Inferno. And he got together with a newspaper editor, Shmuel Perelman, and produced this atlas, in part to try to develop a sort of geographical lexicon for modern Hebrew. It was intended largely as a school atlas. It was published by a publishing company, HaSefer, that was partly owned by Jabotinsky and situated in Mandatory Palestine, but in fact it was printed in London and Leipzig. Now, the most famous map in the atlas is actually the map of the land of Israel. I'm not going to talk about that. What grabbed me and actually shocked me in a way was the map of North America. So if we could move to the next slide. And there we go. This is a map of North America from the Atlas. You can see it's a rather plain map, and it's rather sparsely labeled, as you might expect for a school atlas. What you see here, if you could advance the slide, please, Tom, is the main map is just a political map of North America. I've just translated the title, and the inset here happens to be the population density. Now, what I'm going to do is to do a close-up of Western Canada, which is actually where I'm originally from. And here's where things for me started to get weird. So if you could move to the next slide, please. So here you see Western Canada, and most of you will probably recognize the provinces from left to right of British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. Now, this illustrates a lot of the very idiosyncratic aspects of this whole atlas. For example, the geographical features in some cases are translated from whatever language into Hebrew, and in some cases they're transliterated, and it doesn't make any sense whatsoever sometimes. If you go to the next slide, you can see I've put labels on. Great Slave Lake is in Hebrew translated as the lake of slaves that is big, literal translation. Peace River is translated as Nahar HaShalom, a literal translation. But if I look south at the Snake River, it's translated Nahar HaSnake. It's just transliterated. I mean, that might make sense for something named after a person, but I can't figure out why and how they chose what to translate and what to transliterate. Another interesting aspect, if we go to the next slide, is the choice of geographical, or not geographical, but sort of settlements, human population places that they chose to represent. So if I look in the province of Alberta, I notice that Calgary is on the map. Edmonton, which was the provincial capital and an equally large city in 1925, is missing. If I look at Saskatchewan, Regina is on the map. Saskatoon is missing. And actually, both Calgary and Regina are printed in small Hebrew script, whereas you see there are a whole bunch of other places there that are printed in larger Hebrew block letters, none of which are big cities. If I go to the next slide, I've got labels on those, and represented by capital English letters to show. And what these are, as it turns out, are Jewish agricultural colonies that existed in Western Canada at that time. Now, one thing that shocked me here is part of my family, as I will get to, actually came from Rumsey, Alberta, which you can see is in the map of Alberta near Calgary. These Jewish agricultural colonies were sponsored by Baron Maurice de Hirsch, who set up something called the Jewish Colonization Association in 1891. The first such farming colony was Hirsch, which is there in Saskatchewan and is shown. Basically, he wanted to make it possible for people from Eastern Europe, principally Russia, to move overseas where they could actually own land and become farmers. And he sponsored Jewish immigration to Western Canada, primarily Argentina, and a little bit to Brazil. And if I go to the next slide, I've just moved up. These are labeled as such in the legends of the map. I've copied one from the northern part of the United States map. So these were agricultural colonies in Canada, colonies of the JCA in Canada, just what I was talking about. Right, thank you. So the atlas itself contains text that says there were 14 such colonies in Western Canada, which sounds about right from what I know. Why he chose to portray these 5, again, I don't know, but he's done a much better job of these than he's done of Calgary, Edmonton, Brandon, other cities that were there. And obviously to the people producing this atlas, these were very important, basically for the idea that these Jewish people would move and become farmers. I think this entire atlas kind of is a persuasive atlas in the same way as PJ Mode has talked about persuasive maps. There's a lot of information about Jewish population in different countries and what they did and so on. Now, I would like to go to the next map and just show something. What was kind of weird about this is that the geographical locations of these places are not correct. So if you want to find out where Rumsey, Alberta is, luckily you can go to the Rumsey Map Center. And there they have a Bartholomew Atlas from 1922, which I've shown a bit of a blow up here. And what you can see is in the lower left is Calgary, circled in blue. And there's an arrow drawn to Rumsey, which did appear on the regular maps in the 1920s, also circled in blue. And you'll notice that Rumsey is to the northeast of Calgary, right? Now, if I go to the next slide, please. And here I show what's depicted on that map. Actually, you can see it has Rumsey to the southeast of Calgary. So apparently the actual locations of these places was not important to the makers of the atlas, or at least not very important. The idea that they were there was the thing they were interested in, which kind of I found extremely surprising as well. Now, finally, just to show you what Rumsey was like, here's a picture, a scene from Rumsey taken in the 1930s. This is actually a family picture. The man on the right is my grandmother's first cousin. And this picture is actually rather well known. It's appeared in a lot of displays such as they exist about these Jewish farming colonies. I will add that very few people probably in Canada are even aware of these. The 1930s were particularly harsh for farmers in Western Canada. A lot of small family farms went out of business. They were picked up by much larger farms. In most of these Jewish farming colonies, people either moved to the city or became assimilated. And so more or less they died out by the 1960s. But this atlas kind of preserves a unique memory of them in certain respects. So that's all I have to say in my 5 to 10 minutes here, and I'll be happy to answer questions.
Great.
And thank you for the timing part of it. And also that final image, which I think says more than any words could say.